bring you greetings from the Secretariat of the Lower Niger Congress. At this time that the country, Nigeria, is back on the trajectory we were before 1966 in terms of heading to elections in the face of a disputed constitution. This will be the beginning of a series of messages to get those of our people who see the dangers ahead, who are not carried away by the partisan noise, into an action process to help stop the politicians who are about to take us into an inferno of the type we saw before. We will all remember that there was the event of May 29, 1962, when this regional constitution of the Western region was suspended and Sola was appointed for Western region, which introduced a chain of events that culminated in what we saw in 1964-65 elections, which consumed the First Republic. Of course, straight from those events, we had what became the war that consumed over 3 million people in eastern Nigeria. We are right back on that trajectory at this time as a country, and the politicians are not listening. They want to go to election by all means, whereas the constituents are disputing the constitution by which the winner will govern. Like we know, the Lower Niger Congress is a platform aggregating the self-determination initiatives across the greater eastern region, what I would call the eastern half of southern Nigeria. Some are doing what they call the Biafran agitation, then the Niger Delta, their agitations. But what the Lower Niger Congress has done is to integrate all of those initiatives for self-determination, because that's what question Nigeria must engage now. Under what terms are we in this union? And it's not just the eastern part. We saw in September of 2017 when the Yoruba went out to the Solemn Assembly to declare that they will no longer accept this imposed constitution as basis of the union. Of course, from the middle belt, we've seen the killings going on. We heard when General Danjuma told the whole world that it was a matter of ethnic cleansing, and that immediately brings to the fore another question of how did we get to the point where a federal government will preside over, the killings of its constituents, very much like what we saw in 1966 when it was the turn of the Igbos to be killed. So what we have now is a situation where throughout the country, people are being killed, and there's a federal government presiding over all of it. There's also a coincidence of the president of now being a Fulani, in a situation where all the killings all over the place, fingers are pointing, not just fingers pointing, the Fulani claiming responsibility for the killings. And it raises a whole basket of questions about what the Union of Nigeria has become for the constituents. Of course, it is a matter of public knowledge that Nigeria was not our project in 1914 when the British came in search of their own fortunes here. They imposed that union on us. But at the time we were heading to independence in 1960, there were discussions that went as far as the Lancaster House in London for the units that will federate, the regions that were governed as separate countries by the British during the colonial era. They had discussions on how they would proceed if the British left at the time they would leave in 1960. And what they agreed upon, was to be a federation of 3 regions. It was in that meeting of 1959 that they submitted, they ceded out of their powers to create a central, authority which became the federal government. 6 years down the road, all of those arrangements collapsed. And from that point to this date, Nigeria had been an imposition from those who could overwhelm the rest, and the union became defined by decrees, the last of which was a decree number 24 of 1999, which we call the 1999 Constitution. We're just laying this foundation to let us know how we got to where we are, and to present to us in the coming days the options available to all the sites entrapped in this failed experiment of 1914. And it is in that light that we'll be inviting you to go to the website of the Lower Niger Congress. It is www.lowernigercongress.org. As you go there, you will find direction. There's an action process that is being put in place for those who want to stand up and do the things that will deliver the outcome of self-determination to that part of the country. This information is also important for the rest of Nigeria, because if you ask what the offense of Abiola was, for which he will win elections and then end up in prison and then get killed, you will see that we are back to the same master and servant kind of constitution, which was the apartheid situation of South Africa. In fact, what we have here is worse than apartheid, because in apartheid you knew who the enemy was and you knew how to engage him. But here we are told we are in a democracy and a federal republic. The democracy that Nigeria has, for which people are struggling to go to election now, one more time, it cannot be a democracy, because except the definition of democracy will change for your country, Nigeria. The definition I know is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The Nigeria's democracy cannot pass any of these three legs of test, because government of the people simply means that the people make the supreme rules in keeping with their sovereign authority to so do. That is the people that draw up the constitution, just like the memo and articles of a company is the exclusive business of the owners of the company to draw up. You then come to the second leg of by the people. It is what is contained in that first leg that moderates what happens in the second leg. And so it's only your vote that will get people to government house, and the rules you set up in making the constitution is what will govern them, what will set the boundaries for their actions while they're in government house. That's the second leg. The third leg is for the people. The combination, the interface between the constitution that you make and the politics that it generates in terms of parties contesting to go to government house will then become the third leg in which policies are now coming out that impact the citizen positively. The democracy that is, the so-called democracy that is being pushed forward in Nigeria does not pass any of these three legs of this. So we do not have a democracy. Those who are inviting you to come to vote for one party or the other in the coming election, ask them, by which constitution will the winner govern? Is it the same constitution that was imposed? Is it the same constitution that has our signature at the preamble in the claim that we the Yoruba, we the Ijaw, we the Igbo, we the Yana, we the Efik, we the Idoma, we the have submitted our lands and our people into a union that is now a union of attrition and a union of death. Of course, if that is the constitution by which the winner will govern, we are sure to continue the endemic corruption that is created and protected by that constitution. We are sure to continue with the 68-item exclusive list that makes it impossible for for the country to be a federation, because most of what the federative units should have been doing for themselves, which the regions were doing at the time before the accident of 1966, are now all hijacked by the federal government. The assets and the rights to work those assets. Then you come to the question of the structure itself. How did we come about 36 states? How did we come about the 704 local government areas? By the time you put it all together and you go to the map of the territory, the Nigeria in question, you begin to see a pattern in which a flank of the country, populated by the Fulani and whoever cooperates with them in that place, have brought in something that has become conquest, something that has become a clash of civilization with the rest of the country, and they are pushing into further and further southwards in what we now see as ethnic cleansing. In trying to be in charge at the government house, we saw how Boko Haram came about, we saw how it got transformed into the headsmen we hear about, and we also know about Miyetti Allah and who their patrons are, and the fact that they are not shy to take responsibility for the killings that are going on. It's all a matter of submit your land or submit your life. And we heard the spokesman of the president advising the rest of us, advising the whole country to please submit their lands except they want to be killed. In that kind of a setting, we must dress back and ask ourselves the basic questions thrown up by all of this. Is it election that will resolve this issue? Have we not been having elections since 1960? Why are things getting worse and worse for the ordinary people? Whereas those who swear to uphold and defend that constitution, the politicians, it doesn't matter the party they come from, we could see that the benefits are growing in leaps and bounds. Something is wrong in that kind of a situation, and what the Lower Niger Congress and its Movement for New Nigeria Alliance partners is proposing at this time is that we must do like South Africa did with the apartheid constitution to tell ourselves that this constitution 99 cannot carry Nigeria any further. If we attempt to go into another election with it, like we did in 2015 when the issue really was the constitution, but many people say, oh, let us get Jonathan out of the way, everything will be alright. It became the only issue for going to election to remove Jonathan. It's been removed now. There's somebody else. Now there's an aggregation to say, oh, let's go remove Buhari. It will solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. We have low intensity fires now. If we proceed to another election based on that constitution, where it's like carrying fuel to a low fire, and it might explode just like we saw in 1964-65, that became the war from which we have not recovered. And where we are now is that processes into which people who want to participate can discharge themselves and their energies instead of going to renew this enslavement, renew this instrument of impoverishment that protects corruption and elevates all the wrong values above the correct values. With quota system, you could be sure that excellence will have to kneel in the presence of mediocrity. You could be sure that hard work is punished and laziness rewarded. In all of that, going to election can only keep those things reinforced, take them to another season. And when those who are likely to declare themselves winner in the election, no matter how you vote, when they so declare, they will have another 4 years, and what you see in the middle belt will be a child's play. They are going to continue in their ethnic cleansing business, and they will in fact proceed all the way to the Atlantic waterfront, that is there where they're heading to. And the Sharia that is mutually exclusive with the democracy and the constitutionalism you so very much cherish is just going to you're going to have it if you insist on keeping the union of Nigeria that is defined by this constitution. The action we can take today is to reject the journey to another election on the basis of that constitution. The politicians who are inviting you to go and get your BBC and come and vote for them, you ask them what they are going to do differently. At what time and at what point are they going to change all of that bad arrangement, that structure that we have all agreed is bad? Because if somebody comes in as president, he will have to, there are 36 governors. How is he going to get them to give up? Because the restructuring that will solve this problem will have to do away with these 36 states. They have to be reconfigured into some manageable number. It could be 4, it could be 6, it could be 8 units at the most. Which governor is going to give up his own state at the time you finish the election? Which senator is going to give up his seat? Because if those states are collapsed into a lesser number of federating units, then all the senatorial seats and House of Reps, it is not after an election. Anybody who is telling you that he will solve that problem of the structure of Nigeria after the election, tell him that the Lower Niger Congress said is the road, because he's not going to be able to do it. Those promises have been made in the past and they were not kept. But then they are that if we continue in this journey beyond where it is likely to catch fire, and not only will the union collapse, it will go down with millions of people. That is what we are trying to avoid here. That is what we can avoid now if sufficient number of people will rise up and join in what we'll be inviting them to do in the coming days. We can halt the election. South Africa came to that bus stop in 1990, and those who are already elected can remain in government house. We have no quarrel with that. But we must go into a transition instead of heading to election. We must go to referendum now to decide how those who find themselves here, nobody's going to carry his own land into the Atlantic Ocean. We must go into a referendum for people to recommit to the Union of Nigeria that has collapsed. Since across the country, the constitution has been repudiated. Those 12 contiguous states that introduced Sharia, they have seceded from the secular Union of Nigeria since the year 2000. The other parts now went into the discussion of what to do with their future. And where we are now is that they have all come out rejecting that constitution as basis of the union, and they're making their own, they're taking various steps of constitution making in the regions, in their own blocks, that will then federate in the second layer. That is a federation is a union of constitutions. If you do not go back to determining who is federating and on what terms, that was how Bola put it many years ago, we will continue in this merry-go-round that is now becoming very dangerous, because if this union should catch fire in the way it's bound to catch if we proceed on this current trajectory, of course it will be a sorry day for the whole world. I will let it go at this time, and only ask you to please stand by and pay attention to the things that can be done. The politicians do not come to even 1%. I mean, the ones who actually get into office, they do not amount to 1% of the population that they are taking into this inferno. And therefore, the rest of us are in a position to ask the questions that should be asked and take the steps that should be taken to stop them from taking us into something that will consume too many lives. For the purpose of clarity, the map you see, which is the map of Nigeria broken into 4 blocks, is to explain to us the formations in which these discussions are currently ongoing. The green top is the 12 contiguous states that imposed Sharia in year 2000 and began to enforce it. That's the portion we say has seceded from the secular Federation of Nigeria. And the purple you see on the map is the Middle Belt territory, where the killings are ongoing now. The blue is the Yoruba contiguous territory that includes the Yoruba of Kogi and Kwara. And then the brown is the Lower Niger. Let me spend 1 minute on the Lower Niger. The Lower Niger is simply the description of the territory that became the eastern and midwestern regions in the First Republic. Today, they've been reconfigured into what we call the South, South, and Southeast, fractured into 11 states. What we've done is to put aside all of what Nigeria had imposed in creating those states. We know the circumstances of the creation of the first set of states in May of 1967. And it was just 3 days to the announcement of the Republic of Biafra. At the time, genocide and pogroms had happened for a whole year, from July of 1966. And those states were created to undermine the regions and make it impossible for the region to proceed to challenge what was coming upon the peoples of the region. And therefore, what the Lower Niger Congress has done is looking at what the international instruments on the question of self-determination require to identify a map. You can see the map of 1885 of that territory, showing the constituent nationalities. You see the Ijaw, you see the Igbo bloc, you see the Anan Efik, all the way to what we now have as a Cross River. You could see the 6 compartments of the language groups that are in that territory. What we are doing is to get them to federate. Discussions have been had, and it came all the way to where we had the Solemn Assembly in Port Harcourt 2015, where they decided that they will be going to a referendum to decide their future from a Nigeria that have failed them through and through. And therefore, all of those who are talking about the restoration of Biafra, the Biafra of 1967 was actually the eastern region of the time that became Biafra. It did not include Araba and Araba and all the territory leading up to the Benin area. And what we're saying is that the people that will federate will have to decide in what formations they want to federate. And that discussion has come to the point where we're now heading to that referendum mandated by that Solomon Assembly. And so where we are now is that it is within our reach to put aside all the noise and come forward and participate in the processes that will become that referendum. It will not fall from the sky. We all reject that constitution of Nigeria. The far north was forced to reject it. The Yoruba rejected, the Middle Belt rejected, the Eastern side are rejected. So the whole Nigeria rejected. What next? We must now stop the journey to renewing the life of that constitution by way of elections. And referendums, of course, will be the mechanism by which those who want to federate will be committing to that refederating. And it is after they've committed that we can now go to the question of drawing up a constitution that will be a proper federal constitution that is anchored upon the constitutions that will be federated, that the regional constitutions that will be federated. That is if we find common ground and the goodwill to want to continue to federate. Because the LNC is saying that there's a preliminary question raised by the Sharia that was imposed, even against the background of the feudalism that is also in antagonism to our own civilization. But more importantly, the Sharia, because it's now a question of life and death for those who have to die because others have to, carry out the duties of their own faith. It has made the union impossible as far as we are concerned. And since the constitution that keeps the union in place is now repudiated, we think we have come to the point where we have to accept that we have to stop and revoke the union to the satisfaction of everybody. And if we can't find common ground, of course we proceed in self-determination in whatever formations, according to this map, that people agree on. We continue from here next time. Thank you.